Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Voting has started in Russian-controlled regions of Ukraine on referendums to become part of Russia. The Kremlin proxy referendums are largely seen as Russia's annexations of eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions and shams by Western nations. Ahead of the vote, Britain's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said world leaders would not recognize the results.
We recognize what Russia is attempting to do. We will never accept the outcome of these sham referenda, and that there is no legitimacy whatsoever for the Russian Federation or Vladimir Putin to define sovereign Ukrainian territory as part of Russia.
The votes are being held in the Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and partly Russian-controlled Zaporizhia regions today. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials say they've exhumed 436 bodies from mass burial sites in Izium, in the Kharkiv region, where Ukrainian soldiers recently reclaimed from Russia. 30 of those bodies, officials say, show signs of torture. A team of experts commissioned by the United Nations top human rights body to look into rights violations in Ukraine says its initial investigation has turned up evidence of war crimes in the country following Russia's invasion nearly 7 months ago. The experts mandated by the Human Rights Council earlier this year have so far focused on 4 regions: Kiev, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and Sumy. Presenting their most extensive findings so far, they cited testimonies by former detainees of beatings, electric shocks, and forced nudity in Russian detention facilities, and expressed grave concerns about executions in the 4 areas. The commission's chairman didn't specify who or which side in the war committed most of the alleged crimes. Youth activists have staged a coordinated global climate strike today to highlight their fears about the effects of global warming and demand more aid for poor countries hit hard by catastrophic climate change. Protests took place in the streets of Jakarta, India today.
Climate justice! Make it right now! Climate justice!
Actions were also held in Tokyo, Italy, and Berlin, where tens of thousands of people rallied, calling for the German government to establish a $100 billion fund for tackling climate change. Demonstrations were organized by Fridays for Future, the youth movement that took its cue from activist Greta Thunberg, who began protesting alone outside the Swedish parliament in 2018. In the U.S., lawmakers on Capitol Hill heard testimony about the mental health struggles that have been exacerbated by climate change on young people. Ellie Prickett-Morgan has more.
According to a survey done by Blue Shield of California, 75% of youth nationwide and 80% of youth in California have described feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or stressed due to climate change. Many youth, like Giselle Perez, co-author of HR 975, which advocates for greater mental health resources for youth experiencing climate disasters, understand that their anxiety is justified.
We are anxious about the future. And this anxiety is warranted, because today's children will be exposed to an average of 5 times more disasters than their grandparents. We are facing a potential future of economic instability, mass migration, food insecurity, drought, and stronger and more destructive storms. According to the American Psychological Association, as climate-related disasters continue to increase, more youth will be directly affected by increasing rates of stress and trauma through interruptions in school, disruptions in routine, separation from caregivers due to evacuations and displacement, and parental stress after a disaster.
Giselle and Madigan represent many youth across the country and the world who are working through their fears to try to fight climate change. North Bay Representative Mike Thompson introduced HR 975 earlier this spring. Currently, the resolution has 90 endorsements from environmental group and 40 congressional co-sponsors. From Oakland, for KPFA, I'm Ellie Prickett-Morgan.
Hurricane Fiona has battered Bermuda as a Category 4 storm. Meanwhile, the island of Puerto Rico is still reeling in the aftermath of Hurricane Fiona. President Joe Biden has promised the people of Puerto Rico the full force of the federal government is ready to help the island recover. More than 60% of power customers remained without electricity. A third of customers were without water. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.